Welcome to Stress Mess, a stressless podcast where the chaos is real, the caffeine is strong, and swearing sometimes happens, and that's okay. I'm Samantha Elizabeth, health and wellness coach, chronic overthinker, and proud BFFs to stress itself. Here we're ditching perfection, embracing unfiltered real talk, and making mindset shifts that might just keep us from screaming into the void. Let's get messy. In this episode, I sit down with a dynamic and unfiltered Pam Fleming to talk about something we all love: constant, unpredictable change. We cover the emotional whiplash of major shifts, how Pam ended up in the world of change, and why managers desperately need more training. This one's part chaos, part wisdom, and 100% real. Let's dive in. All right, we are now recording. Hey, Pam, how are you?
I am wonderful. How are you today?
Good. Thanks. I actually have you on the podcast because I know that you are a change agent. You are somebody that works within change. And
Mhm.
I really wanted to talk to you about change because one thing I've been noodling on, since I was very young, we always had lots of change in my family. We were always moving. We always had to go to new school, make new friends, all of that kind of stuff. My parents got a divorce. We moved from Massachusetts to California. There was a lot of change in my childhood. There was nothing stable. And
Mhm.
so when my ex and I, we weren't exes at the time, but when my ex and I had our child, we decided that the one thing that we wanted to provide our child is stability.
Yes.
Same house, same school system, all of the stability things, that we didn't have as children because he was an Army brat. So,
Oh,
he moved constantly, because his dad's career, that he had. So, with me, I've been thinking a lot about change. I've been thinking a
mhm.
lot about when people, I'm not talking about children. I mean, because of course, as a child, it's very difficult. But when, as an adult, there's constant change, happening in your life,
Yes.
and it's hard to feel settled.
Mhm.
Some people like it, some people like constant change, some people don't. But I
Mhm.
kind of wanted to kick off the conversation and kind of talk about that and talk about, perhaps if you can give some examples in your life, or anything else that you see in other people's lives about change and, how to kind of navigate that.
Yeah, definitely. The reality is just as you said, some people love living in chaos. Not
Yeah.
very many people, but some people love living in chaos. And I'll tell you my story about how I got into change.
Mm.
So when I was a kid, and I know you talked about kids and when they go through change, but that's actually where I got my start in change. Didn't know it way back then, but the reality is, as a kid, I was somewhere between 8 to 10. I believe I was around the 8ish, 9ish age. And
Mhm.
just imagine kids playing on the playground, merry-go-rounds, all the laughter, all the things you hear. And then what? What happens? All of a sudden, someone gets mad about something, right? A
Right.
little argument breaks out. And all I hear next is, that's why your mom is not your mom. You're adopted.
Oh, wow.
And at that time, Samantha, I tell you, it's like, how you can imagine the merry-go-round just start to slow down in slow motion and you just hear
Yeah.
that slow laughter?
Yeah.
That's what it was like for me, finding out I was adopted. And for me, to be honest with you, it wasn't the fact of finding out that I was adopted, it was how I found out I was adopted.
Yeah. And how did that kid know, though, that you were adopted? Was
Because
it kind of
it was
well known?
it was a cousin of mine.
Oh, it was a cousin of your. Okay.
It
Oh,
was a cousin of mine.
wow.
I
What
always
a
say
way to
that
find
to
out.
you, but it was a cousin of mine, and it was widely known in the family with everybody except me at that
Oh,
point.
wow.
And what made this whole thing even worse is I really didn't have a great relationship with my mom, with my adoptive mom. So it just made things even worse. But I say that to say, in that moment, you hear the silence all of a sudden, your world stops spinning, and it's just like you're stuck there. You don't know what to
Yeah.
do. And then you
Right.
just feel the tears streaming.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I tell you, in that moment, I felt such embarrassment, such shame, such guilt. And it's always the wondering of, well, why me? You know,
Yeah.
why was I adopted? Why did my birth mom want me? You know, and all those things. Now, I don't know if I was thinking about it in that fashion at the age of 8 or 9, but I know now I was,
Oh,
I
yeah.
know I felt the embarrassment about it. And
Right.
at that point when I kind of resonated with it a little bit, but I never really fully resonated and got over this until I kid you not, I was probably around 20, 21 years old in the military.
Yeah.
I went into the military at 18 years old, and
Wow.
I just had to make a commitment within myself to move on, to just internalize what was really nagging at me, that gut feeling, that just the embarrassment and the shame. And no one in the military knew,
Yeah.
but you're still carrying that same baggage from way, way, way back when. And
Yeah.
so, sometime in my growing up years, I made the commitment that I never wanted anyone else to feel that type of pain when they were going through a change, or feeling embarrassed, or feeling hurt,
Yeah.
or feeling like they, didn't know how they were going to get through it. And of course, at that age, way back then, there was no way I knew anything about change management. I just
Yep.
know how I was feeling inside, and
Right.
it wasn't a good feeling.
Why
And
were
as
you
Go ahead.
let me I'm sorry to interrupt, but why
Oh,
why were you embarrassed by being adopted? Is it because you didn't know anybody else that was adopted and it was
well,
tell me what
that
that
that is true. Number one, because number one, I didn't know if anyone else was adopted, and I don't even know if I knew what adopted was. But
Mm,
hearing the words "your mom is not your mom,
yeah.
you're adopted," then you know that there's something different there. Because
Yeah.
the reality is, you know, I was born in the late '60s. You know,
Mhm.
right hitting on 1970, and I lived in a small town in Louisiana.
Okay.
And just having Black children adopted at that time wasn't just like the thing to do, So no one that I knew of was adopted. And
Yeah.
um, but for me, it was an embarrassment to find out that, hey, your
Oh,
mom is not your mom. And again, like
yeah.
I said, to me, I don't know if it's the "you're adopted" that didn't really resonate or sit with me, because I really didn't know what that meant. But I
Yeah.
knew what "your mom is not your mom" meant.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where more of the embarrassment piece came from.
Sure.
And, growing up, admittedly, I didn't have a great relationship with my mom.
Mhm.
And I think that's probably what took me so long to get over it as an
Sure.
adult.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, the older I got, the more I knew, whenever I get into this world and into a working job, I don't
Mhm.
want people to feel that way when they have
Yeah.
to change, or when they're going through a change. And
Yeah.
fast forward to my life today, or my life in change management, because I've been in change management now over 20 years. But
Mhm.
fast forward to now, I see the connection between how I felt and
Yeah.
how people feel when they're going through change in these organizations. It can be a reorganization, because
Yeah.
guess what? They don't tell people you're about to lose your job, right?
Mhm.
It's business as usual until you get that tap on the shoulder to come to HR.
Yeah.
In a merger and acquisition, how many people are sitting on pins and needles because, oh my God, we know that there's mass duplication in this company. Am I going to have a job? So they're sitting months and months wondering, the angst, the anxiety, the fear, the depression,
Sure.
all those things that come along with it.
Yeah.
Even if we're just talking about a systems implementation, right?
Mm. Mhm.
Think about the employee that's been there 20, 30 years who've never had to use technology before. And now
Yeah.
all of a sudden we're bringing in technology, let alone talking about bringing in AI. Uh,
Yeah. Right.
think about those employees and the angst and anxiety and fear that they have and that they carry with them. And that's what I carried with me. And I think that's
Right.
what connects me so much and so deeply to the world of change management, that
Yeah.
when I go into organizations, I am intentional about working with leaders to say, hey, let's make sure that when we as a project team are pulling this whole project together, we're
Mhm.
not thinking about it from a leadership perspective. We're not thinking about our impact, because our impact is not the layperson's impact. Let's
Sure.
think about the people who have fingers on the keyboard. How are they going to feel? How are
Yeah.
they going to understand what's happening to them, when it's happening? Number one, why is it happening? How are they going to be impacted? How are their day-to-day jobs? And for organizations that refuse to provide this information transparently, it makes
Mhm.
the change so much harder. And I like to say, you're going to pay the devil anyway. So I'd rather pay the devil I know than the devil I don't, because the
Yeah.
devil I don't means now you're going to pay somebody to come in on the back end and do so much more work at such a higher rate than if you would have just done it right the first time.
Yeah, I completely understand. I mean, because working in change management too is part of what I do. For employee experience, client experience. I gotta say that for me and going into change management and being able to be a leader in change too, that
Mhm.
does come from my childhood of constant change and just being comfortable with the ambiguity and being able to go from one environment that you're comfortable with or maybe semi comfortable with to a newer environment, and even though it might be a positive better environment for you, you still mourn the past a little bit. You still
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's something that in my career, I've been part of a lot of layoffs, I've been a part of a lot of reorganizations, and I've been a part of a lot of like, okay, we're moving you from one building to another now. Oh, we're making you work from home now. Oh, now you need to come back into the office. Like all of those huge changes that really affect kind of our psyche as we're working. I've been through a lot of those, and I've found, and this is something as a child too, is
Mhm.
when I get into a new environment, I know how to make it home.
Yes.
And not only the physical space, but in the mental space
Mhm.
too, of like, okay, this is now home and I have to make the best out of this space. So like as a child, going in and saying, okay, this is the room that my bed is in now. And here's some comforts that I can have with myself, whether it be a stuffed animal or, something like that. And, for people that are going through major change within an organization, it's hard, especially if you've never been through a lot of change in your lifetime, to have change happen to you in an organization and have it happen to you in your career, that it's very shocking.
Yeah.
And I know we have talked a lot about the change cycle before, the
Mhm.
grief cycle of change, and having that kind of shock and anger and denial and all of those kind of things that we all go through when there's a change, whether it is a negative change or a positive change.
Yeah.
And that is something that I know, as a child and growing up and knowing, that there's change, it's kind of hard for me sometimes too to sit somewhere, for a long time too, because
Yes.
I always feel like there's something that's going to change,
Mhm.
and like I'm always like looking around the corner, kind of going, all right, so when is this going to change? Because something's going to change, something major is going to happen. And it
Exactly. Exactly.
sometimes, yeah,
And I'm going to use your sign behind you because I love you say maybe
yeah,
swearing will help. So I am so damn glad that you mentioned the fact about when you experience change at the level that you and I have experienced change, that you get
yeah,
comfortable with being uncomfortable.
yeah,
But this is where we implore, and you do this very well, I'm sure, with your clients. This is where we implore leaders to not put employees in that position,
yeah,
because forcing them to be uncomfortable is rough, because
yeah,
these are the people who you are expecting to build your business, to
right,
maintain your business, to do all the things that need to be done to keep your business running.
right.
Ambiguity is not the place or the space that you would want them to be. And
Yeah.
so, but sometimes I find, Samantha, it is so hard to get leaders to understand that and conform, because sometimes I feel like these leaders have really forgotten what it was like to be that person who was
Yeah.
on the receiving end of, we're going through this merger and acquisition. Imagine I'm in a 50,000 person Fortune 500 company and we're acquiring another 50,000 person Fortune 500 company.
Oh, yeah.
Can you imagine the level of redundancy that there is? I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
people know that there will be job losses, but the amount of quietness around it is ridiculous. But I really understand from being in change, and you understand this as well, that there are just some things we can't communicate.
Yeah. Very
Because we
true.
want to control mass chaos, right?
Mhm.
But I don't think that there's anything wrong with some level of transparency around a lot of this. And so, your examples about moving from place to place, and being, was it you a military brat or your?
No, that was my ex, my
Okay.
child's father.
And
Yeah.
see, I understand that too because I was in the military and
Mhm.
we moved all the time. Typically in
Yeah.
the military, you're moving. Some people move every 2 years, some move every
Yeah.
three, some move every four, and it
Yeah.
becomes a way of life. And especially for those people who are lifers in the military or who
Yeah.
retire and they have kids, their kids hardly ever make long-term friends because every two to
Yeah.
3 years they're uprooted. And I mean, you said the perfect example of how you never really made friends and how you never really had solid roots. And you know, on the outside you may be okay with it, but on the
Sure.
inside, I'm sure you were feeling some kind of way, right?
Oh yeah, it feels definitely isolating, very lonely. You kind of you, you quickly make friends, with people. You
Yeah.
kind of know how to do that, right? But then there's a lot of eventually that you're going to lose them.
Yes. So let me
And
ask you this question because that's a
yeah,
very interesting concept.
yeah.
Because for me and my spouse as adults in the military,
Mhm.
it's not that detrimental to us. But
Yeah.
as a kid, or even in your tween or teen years, how
Yeah.
do you forego the bonding with people? Because what if you find somebody that you're really great friends with, and next thing you know, you're up and leave? How do you deal with that? How do you reconcile that?
Well, I gotta say, probably I have an original best friend, and it was a boy. I was a tomboy, when I was younger, and when I left Massachusetts, he told me that he no longer wanted to be friends with me, and it was at the age, before, of course, the internet, so you couldn't email people, and so it
Yeah.
was about sending people letters via the mail, and he told me, well, I can't remember. I was 8, no, 9 years old. So we were very young. So, and he told me, of course, in a very much like, I hate you, please get out of my life, type of thing. He was very hurt that I was leaving. It wasn't on my own volition, that I was leaving, moving from Massachusetts to California. But, that happened and I tried to remain in contact with him, but he was just not having it, whatsoever. But I did have another good friend, Lisa, and she was actually the guest on my very first podcast.
Oh, okay.
We've stayed in touch. We've done the pen pal thing, wrote back and forth to each other. I got to say that she was probably better at it than I was, because, we were such good friends. We kept in, contact with each other, and we still keep
Mhm.
in contact with each other. In fact, she just posted something today, and I absolutely loved it,
Yeah.
And so those are the kind of things that, like, okay, I held on to that particular friendship, and she did a good job, of keeping us, together and keeping us as friends.
Yes.
Um, but as a child, it's and then we kept moving, in within Massachusetts, and then when we moved to California, we kept moving within California. It wasn't a military thing, it was because we were poor,
Yeah.
and or we had to go live with a family member, and then that family member is now having kids, so now they got to kick us out of the house and we got to go live with another family member, and
Yeah.
we kept doing that. But it was about I was trying to hold on to, some friendships
Yeah.
and, still remain in contact with them. But you as a child and then going into your teen years and then, even into early adult years, you change as a person. And
Yes.
there's some people that you were friends with, and a lot of people can identify with this. There's some people that you're friends with in a period of time in your life because you have something in common. You like the same band, you go to the same school. There's so many different things that you could have. You go, you do sporting events together,
Mhm.
or you're in sports together. You're on a team together, and then of course, once you stop doing those
Yeah.
things and you move on in your life, you go to college and maybe you join a different sport or something like that. Then you make those kind of friends, and then you've got all of these pockets of friends, and hopefully if you were that good of friends, and it was beyond, what you guys had in common,
Yes.
that you continue to be able to continue to have those as friends. And that was something, for me that, I'm going to say my original friend, Lisa, I'm going to call her the OG there. She was, you know, we've always had something in common that was at not just a very surfacey thing. It was a very core thing about who we were as people. And, that's the kind of friends that you meet along the way that you can continue to be friends with. But there was a lot of going into a new situation, and definitely, like, if you're going into a new school,
Mhm.
sometimes you're the cool new kid, because everybody wants to discover, what about you. And there was nothing exciting about me. So it was like, I go in and they'd be like, so like, you lived in Massachusetts. Yeah, I lived in a small town in Massachusetts and nothing went on. We lived right next to a factory. One time there was a factory fire. That's it. That's exciting. That was my whole life, basically. Of my
And all the kids were like, uh,
Yeah. Oh, and I guess, like, it would have been cooler if I moved from California to Massachusetts, because Massachusetts is obsessed with California. So
uh,
that would have been cooler because
so you made a backwards move.
I know I did the back. I moved from the boring place. I shouldn't say Massachusetts is boring. Sorry, people. But, like, I moved from, not an exciting town to a little bit more exciting. If I had made the opposite thing, I probably would have been like oh, what's it like living in California? But then I moved into California and people were just kind
Yeah.
of like, she's all right. And I was the weird child too, of just because it's like I had an older sister and I was the goofball, between us. And so I was the weird kid between me and my sister. So, a lot of times you normally make friends, with people that are also weird, and that are kind of the misfits, and I was always part of the misfits crowd,
Yeah.
and really just try to cope with not being the exciting person, not being, the person that everybody wanted to be friends with, because I wasn't cool, like, I didn't have a lot of money, and I didn't have a pool or anything like that at my house. It was a lot of not that kind of stuff. Like, like, my parents are poor, so, here's a pair of shoes that I got last year, like that sort of thing. It was not
Yeah.
I wasn't definitely not the exciting child. And there was a point at one point where as a child, and this is my child mind, where I did make up stories that were more exciting about myself. But then I quickly realized, wow, that is not me. It's to, like, make up a story. I once made up a story that I rescued a baby from a burning building.
Oh my goodness. What a story.
I was 7 years old, but at the same time, I really wanted to make friends with people, and people were making fun of me because I was dyslexic and I often got things wrong, especially
Mhm.
numbers, and
Yeah.
I couldn't read out loud, in class, and there was a lot of reading out loud, like popcorn, like popcorn to me, and I'd be like, I can't read for anyway. So I had a lot of problems as well too, like
Yeah.
some, disabilities that were not addressed because we moved too much, for me to be able to, like, get any
Get
stability there. Anyway,
diagnosed, right?
yeah. But I gotta say that, like, that was obviously a big struggle too. And I undiagnosed ADHD at that time too. So, it was definitely, something where I wanted to be the cool kid. I wanted to be that, but then I realized that is just not me. And I'm okay being not the exciting person, like,
Well,
and
I'm glad you say that because it makes me wonder, and I've thought about this throughout my life too, that and I didn't even realize it before I found out I was adopted, that I actually do look very different from everyone else in my family. They're much lighter skinned than I am,
yeah,
but that never resonated. And you never notice your differences until someone points them out to you. But
yeah,
I always wonder because I was the only one out of four other siblings where I was always outgoing.
yeah,
I was a majorette. I was always going to football games, and the rest of them were kind of like house people.
yeah,
They really didn't like going places, and I was like the most outgoing, and I made friends very easily. And I guess that's why today I can go in the grocery store and just kick up a conversation with the person in line in front of me or behind me with no
yeah,
problem and start a
right.
whole conversation. And my husband be like, "Do you know those people?" I was like, "No."
Yeah. Yeah, very true. I can do the same thing. And maybe this is why we became friends, because, we can normally just kick up a conversation with somebody and, start to get a little bit more comfortable with people. And maybe that just comes from change as well too, and just understanding change and understanding how people, go through a change, I
Yes.
think that's
You know,
really helpful.
that's true because remember how we met? We were at the conference, right? And we were
Yep.
at this big round table and it had a
Yep.
whole bunch of people. And I don't know how you and I, and we were across the table from each other.
Right.
We just somehow gravitated.
Gravitated towards each other because it was like, hi, friendly face, like,
Maybe it was meant to be. It was meant to be.
right. Yeah, very true. And yeah, I mean, I'm normally the person that is, like I said, I'm not the most exciting person and everything, but I do love to look for connections
Yes.
that I can make with people, and then also discover what connections that they need. And if I find that I have another connection that would help them in some way, love that too. Like,
Yes.
I just that is, something that I do look for, is connections with in me
Exactly.
to other people and to other people, and
Yes.
just giving them, whether it's a people resource, it's isn't money sometimes, like
Yes.
I'm a little too giving with my money a lot of times, but it's just I just love to see people happier, and that's,
Yes.
something that brings my like stress level down, because also being an empath as well too. And
Yes.
if I see somebody in a really tough spot, I just want to go and help them, and I have such a heart for people, and
You
making.
really do. You really do. Because when I met you at the conference, you were so quiet at the table. And when we got up, and I think it may have been a break, and we started chatting, man, you just started chatting away. And I was like, oh my God, this is a whole different person. And then you drew me in because you started talking about change management. And I was like, oh my God, someone who's speaking my language.
Yeah.
Because we were at the ATD conference. So, you're
Yeah.
training folks. And, even though that's a part of change and what we do,
Yeah.
it's not in and of itself what we do. And so,
Right.
so yeah, I was, I count my blessings for being seated at that table with you that day.
Yeah, definitely. And just for those that don't know, Association for Talent Development is ATD. And
Yeah.
I think it's td.org or td.com. Anyway, their website, just in case somebody wants to know more about that. But yeah, that was something. I think that when you become friends with people, it's that serendipitous thing,
Yes.
that you meet somebody and you connect with them right away. And it might be like, for our things, it was change, but then we're also discovering more and more ways. Every time I talk to you, I discover a new way, that we have something in common, or that, we're aligned on our thinking on something. And I absolutely love that. But I also love too, that we also oppose each other on certain things, which is great, because
Exactly.
you need that, to be able to learn more about something, and have a more open mind.
Of course. And you know what? I don't need two of me.
No.
One of me is enough. I don't need two of me. But the reality is, and I love the fact that you've mentioned that things that we oppose on, we talk about it even in our LinkedIn messaging.
Yeah.
And I think that that's great because when I tend to see people who agree with everything that you say all the time, I feel like
Yeah.
there's no authenticity there.
Right.
It's not about me wanting someone to agree, because guess what? It's just my point of view, and my point of view may not be the right point of view. So let's have the conversation and talk about it, because I'm always willing to learn. Because for me, I always feel like feedback is a gift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not talking about opposition as like we're butting
Oh,
heads
yeah,
or anything
yeah.
like that, but certainly, that we want to kind of like raise our hand and say like, oh, hey, and it's just something that's helpful, because you're absolutely right. It is a gift, if you getting feedback from somebody, and I know sometimes people reach out to me and say, hey, what about, or I'm seeing something wrong. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, because I'm not seeing something, and I love when people tell me and raise their hand and say, that they're seeing an issue or something like that. Because when you're deep into something, and this about change too, when you're deep into something, it's hard to pull yourself out of it sometimes and see the bigger picture, or see how it might affect, a certain person, or, something like that. And that's like super helpful for you to kind of take that step back and put the problem or whatever you're working on the table
Mhm.
and look at it from a different perspective.
It really is, because think about it. When you're writing the communications, for example, and this is a good example for me.
Yeah.
I never fashion myself as a comms person, but if I write a communication, I'm so close to it, I can
Mhm.
edit that communication 10 times and I may
Yeah.
still miss that same misspelling, or I still may miss that same period.
Yeah.
Because when I read things in my mind, in my mind's eye, I read it the way it's supposed to be written,
Oh, yeah.
probably not necessarily how it's written on the page. And you would read it and you'd be like, oh, well, you misspelled this word, or hey, you left off a period, or hey, you have two periods. That's exactly why I reached out to you, what it was, a
Yeah.
week, 2 weeks ago, and I said, hey,
Yeah.
give me some feedback on my program, because there are things that I may obviously be missing. So I love having someone who I can authentically say they're going to give me the feedback that I need.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that's, part of having good friends too, that never everybody's a yes person for you.
Exactly,
And I
exactly.
love, yeah, or somebody, calls you out on your BS or something like that, like,
Like,
because
come
there's
on,
times,
Pamela, you know better than that.
I mean, there's times like, and you think like, okay, this is what I'm thinking. And I'm a self proclaimed overthinker for sure. And I'll run it by a friend and go, hey, this is what I'm thinking. This is the conclusion that I'm coming to. They're just like, what? How did you come to that conclusion? And
and,
I'm
and,
just
and how
like,
did you get there?
right. Well, let me see. I went down a rabbit hole, like those kind of things. So that's what happens too. I mean, that's why you have people that are outside of a situation. I mean, this goes along with change as well, are outside of it and go, wait a second. How did you get to this conclusion? And it might just be you put your blinders on and you're just like full steam ahead, or you're choosing to ignore, some facts or something like that.
Yes.
I know if I start dating eventually, I'm going to say red flags where, you but it's those kind of things, that you need friends, you need honest friends, and you need people not to be naysayers as well too. I mean, because, also you do have friends that are, and I'm going to say this, like, would be jealous of you even starting another relationship because you're taking time away from them and
Exactly.
might go, I don't like this guy. You know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
just because it's for selfish reasons. So, but it's those, kind of things that you do want actual authentic friends, to be able
I
to.
and to be honest with you, Samantha, I love the fact that of all the things we could have talked about, that you started off our conversation talking about change, because even in our personal lives, change is something that's a constant, and it's never the same thing every day.
Yeah.
But if we bring it full circle back to the workplace,
Yeah.
that's where it becomes super critical, because all the things that we just laughed about, those things are hypercritical in an organization, because if there's a leader who can't see past, they're going to do just because I say do, or
Yeah.
they're going to adopt just because I say adopt, they
Right.
have, they have no choice. All of those things are wrong. Everyone
Yeah.
has a choice. Even if
Right.
it's not adopting, I may not be leaving, I might be quiet quitting, I may not be
Hmm.
leaving, I still have a choice not to adopt. Maybe I'm not being trained properly,
Yep.
because I've run across a lot of organizations now that's really not valuing training. They
Yeah.
like, oh well, we've done this 12 years ago, and people got it then, they'll just get it now. Really? I'm like, I'm like, really? Is that what we're doing today in 2025?
Yeah. Wow. It's crazy. I did hear about like loud quitting the other day too.
Ooh, what's loud?
Um, Loud quitting is where you posted it on social media before you actually quit.
That's crazy quitting.
I know. And I know. I mean, that's kind of like damaging not only to the company, but it's what
Yeah,
people feel like they need to. It's kind of like when you have a bad experience, with a company or something like that, and you blast them on social media and you say, do better,
yeah,
company. I would really hope that that person had tried to go through their customer service first before they blast them on social media. Because I know when I work in, customer experience, that's one thing is that working with a particular company right now to get feedback from people, I always say, like, because their one thing is they say, well, we want people to review us on Google.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, you think that that's the first time you want to hear from somebody is when they review you on
Exactly.
Google? You
Exactly.
want to give them an opportunity first to do a survey, to give feedback directly to you, or email it, like email somebody or whatever it may be first, and then say, if you had a great experience with us, please review us on Google. And that
Exactly.
helps. It helps that,
Exactly.
yeah, you solve their issue first, rather than they go out there and say, they never resolved my issue, or I had this bad experience first. You want to give them an opportunity for you to do right by them first, before they go blast you on social media or the internets, altogether. So,
Exactly.
that's just part of that. But anyway,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Pam, for being on this podcast and giving us
Of
lots
course.
of,
I want to tell you one more thing.
yeah,
One
please.
thing that we do at our company, one of our offerings is, and I don't know if a lot of people have heard of this, but we do a state interview. Have you heard of that?
No,
So
give me that. Yeah,
in
give me that.
organizations, when people are leaving, they typically want to do what? An exit interview.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually go in and we do state interviews with their employees, because what we
Yeah.
want to do is find out what's keeping you here.
Yeah.
What do you value about the organization?
Yeah.
We put strategies in place to help the company with the employee experience, so that
Yeah.
way you don't have to worry about doing exit interviews, because your people are staying because they want to stay. They're
Yeah.
staying because they believe in your mission. So I think
Mhm.
that's something that I really feel organizations need to start looking more into, doing stay interviews, because I think if you do stay interviews, you'll have much less exit interviews.
Yeah, and thank you so much for bringing that up, because that is super important. When the reason why companies do surveys, for employees, is to find out what are they doing well. I mean, because I know a lot of times companies are looking at, what are their weaknesses or threats, more than they're looking at their strengths and their opportunities.
Exactly.
And that's a lot of what companies are looking for, is they're looking for the negative to fix the negative, but they forget about what
Exactly.
positive things. Yeah.
Exactly. In the state interview, it's more than just coming in and doing a survey. Actually, it's less about doing a survey. It's really doing a deep dive, because it
Yep.
also comes with a playbook. Here is
Yeah.
how you're going to move forward. It might be writing some of these things in SOPs. It might be changing the way we recruit. It might be changing the way we reward people,
Yeah.
recognize people. There's a whole playbook that goes around it. And I know it sounds simplistic to say, hey, I want to come and do a state interview.
Yeah.
But, I think that is a positive part of change management that I feel like the change community should be pushing more, because, people leave for all kinds of reasons. And what's the number one reason we hear people leave, right? They don't leave organization, they leave bad
Yeah.
bosses.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
maybe if we really understood why people stayed, we can help. And guess what? You know what I find is a big one when you do state interviews?
Mhm.
Lack of leadership development.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
lack
That's a
of
big one.
development. Because how many times have you been in an organization where they say, you know what? Pam is knocking it out of the park as an individual contributor. She'd be a great person in this managerial role. And then there's no training for Pam.
Yep.
And you put Pam in this role with all these expectations. Pam has never managed people. Pam
Yep.
has probably only managed tasks and maybe
Mhm.
some processes. Managing people is a whole nother ball of wax. You know,
Yeah. I gotta say, I'm working with a company right now, and that's typically what a lot of companies do, is they take an overachieving
Mhm.
individual contributor, somebody that is very passionate about the work, that understands the work, that does turn around and teach other people about how to do the work and how to
Yeah,
do it better. But they put them in a management position, which is a completely different mindset,
yeah,
as far as being a good team player. You're not a team player, at that point. Of course,
exactly.
you're more than that, and so there's a lot of that goes into that. So I actually am, working with a company right now to build up their manager training, to be able to give at least their managers right now a baseline,
That's
you know
awesome.
to
That's
to
awesome.
start with, and start building from there. And we're calling it, building the foundation. And it's just a very foundational thing for a lot of organizations that they need to do,
Yeah,
is even if they have somebody that comes from the outside that was a manager and they've been a manager for many years, there could be some deficiencies within that manager's training that they had before, or maybe they never received training before and they've
exactly.
been a manager without the proper training. It just happens. I mean, it's not anybody's fault other than the organization realizing, that, oh, we don't need to train somebody. They just know how to do the work and they can teach other people how to do it. It's more than that.
Well, and you also have to think about it from a cultural perspective as well, right? So think
Yeah.
about if I came from Google as a manager,
Yep.
I'm probably working with a lot of, millennials and these folks who are quick to catch on to technology, and they're fast paced, and they're,
Right.
anything that slows them down gets in their way.
Yeah.
If I'm going to now a big manufacturing company where everything just kind of flows at the pace of whatever, we have people that's been there 20, 30 years and there's no real rush on anything.
Yeah.
I might need to change my managerial mindset.
Yeah, definitely. And there's so many different types of manager
Yes.
styles, that you can go with. But yeah, definitely. Well, this has been a great conversation.
It
I
has.
really appreciate.
Me.
Yeah, definitely. I'll have to have you back, when we get updates and stuff like that, what's going on in your world. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Of course. Love being here. Love your podcast. Love the name. I love it. I love what you're doing. So congratulations to you on all the great things that you're doing as well.
Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Well, it's stressful, but I'm a stress mess anyway. So, that's what it's all about. So just joking.
Hey, let's take our stress mess and stress less.
Yes, there you go. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.